If you look back, was your father kind of a role model for you?
He was more of a role model, if we can talk that way, as in when I grow up, I wanted to be more like my father than like my mother.
Please try and tell us why, because you're quoted by telling already early in your life that you saw that he had a kind of interesting life and her life was a little boring. Why was that?
Boring and difficult. My mother was in this constant pain. She was, every day looked the same. Screaming at the children, trying to get them food, trying to get them to sleep, trying to get them dressed, trying to prevent them from quarreling, fighting with the Saudis so that they could sell her food. You know, her life seemed to be this continuous struggle. There was no pleasure in it. My father was laughing. He was bringing all these men to visit. He was very important because he would stand up and everyone would sit down, and, you know, he was just, you know, he commanded respect, and he was always dressed very well. He was clean. He was happy. He was also very self-confident. He was not the victim that my mother seemed to be constantly. He seemed to be in charge. And I thought, I want to be in charge of my life.
But rather early you discovered that there was a big difference between girls and boys and how they were treated.
Yes.
When was that? What did you discover?
I remember as little girls, even my sister and I, my grandmother would say, you have to sit with your legs crossed. And my brother could sit like this. But we were little girls, so if we sat like this, it was, so you had to cross your legs. You had to pull your dress over your knees. My brother wore shorts, and as a child you don't understand, and you want to say, but he's doing it too, and it was, but he's a boy. And a little older, maybe 4, maybe 5, he could go and play outside with the other boys and could stay away as long as he wanted, sometimes much longer. Like when we were 8 or 9 in Saudi Arabia, later in Ethiopia, he stayed away until 11 p.m., 12 p.m., 12 midnight.
And you were not allowed?
There was always company, and always the answer was because you're girls.
How much of this is cultural and how much of this is religion?
This is cultural. But the value for valuing men more than women is also religious. It's Islamic, but it's not only Islamic. The Christian religion and the Jewish religion simply, it's written in all the holy books, values men more than women. Christians and Jews today, after their religions have been through the Reformation and through the Enlightenment, have different attitudes, and Islam is not there yet.
Which influence did Islam have on your childhood when you were a small kid?
I think the most important influence was before we came to Kenya. In Ethiopia, maybe there was a little bit of consciousness, but I remember before we came, I didn't even think that it was possible that there were other people who are not Muslims. It didn't occur to me. And
you hadn't seen it?
No. In Somalia, everyone was Muslim that was around us. In Saudi Arabia, everyone was Muslim. And so it was about degrees of practice. And we didn't practice Islam so much when we were living in Somalia. And when we came to Saudi Arabia, we practiced it absolutely, or at least people tried to.
When did it occur to you that you didn't feel like living as an Islamic woman?
It wasn't like an Islamic woman. I wanted such things as I want to shape my own destiny, I want to choose my own husband, I want to decide how many children I want to have, I want to make my own choices, I want to earn my own money. It was all about that, and I didn't really connect it to Islam. I didn't dare connect it to Islam. And I remember attempts made by girls when I was in secondary school who tried to, get out of the system where they didn't have choices. But they were punished, they were brought back, they were married off at a young age. But I started to connect it to Islam after the 11th of September, but that was after I had lived for 10 years in Holland. And it was after I had discovered that not only we as Somalis, but also all the other Muslims from non-Somali countries in Holland used exactly the same arguments as my mother to say this is un-Islamic, this is Islamic, this is un-Islamic, this is Islamic. And everything about the woman that's Islamic was get married, be a good housewife, be a good mother, don't finish school. You know, that was cover yourself, the segregation of the spaces. That's when it was like, hey, this is not fair. But even then, I thought it was a misinterpretation of Islam. I didn't think that that was true Islam.
What is true Islam then?
These arguments were not derived from the Quran or from the Sunnah, the model of the Prophet Muhammad as a moral guide. Because I was taught, do not think negative thoughts of Islam. If you think negative thoughts of Islam, you'll be punished in the hereafter. And it's only really after I got rid of the fear of hell and the fear of the hereafter that I was able to just say, okay, I understand it's in the Quran, I understand it's in the model, or the model of the Prophet Muhammad as a model, but I think it's wrong. I think they are wrong.
How did you get the strength to say, no, I'm not going to think that way?
You get it. I mean, I had enough knowledge. I had an alternative social network. I was no longer really dependent on the immediate family for my emotional or financial well-being. So, you know, the more solid my independence became, the braver, you can say, I became in facing the issue of hell and heaven. And I think the true emancipation lies there. And that's why I made the film Submission. It's not, I understood that it's not only about the family locking you up. There are many women who are much braver than I am, who will and can get out of that. But it's ultimately the padlock is the padlock that you will be punished in the hereafter. So if you get rid of that, there's another conditioning, which is the mental conditioning to believe that there is a hell and there is a God who's going to punish you if you don't do as he said. And if you do as he said, which you allow yourself to be abused and you remain in the abuse.
But many religions have this kind of thinking system.
Yes.
Why are you so critical against Islam then?
Because the other religions, by the way, the Judeo-Christian tradition, which I came to find in Holland, was through this systematic criticism, through systematic scrutiny of these religions, people were able to get out of it.
You're writing about Islam and says that inside Islam there is a kind of hate and hatred inside. Why do you think that?
Islam divides the world into Muslims and non-Muslims. And not only that, even Muslims are divided into active believing ones, the mu'minun, and the hypocrites, or the munafiqun. And it goes on. It's very totalitarian in that only those who follow as precisely as possible the example of the Prophet Muhammad are true Muslims. Those who do not need to be brought back, need to be punished, need to be ostracized, need to be killed. That's what it's full of. It divides the world into the people of the book and the people outside of the book. The people of the book who are not Muslims, they have to pay a certain tax if they are living in an Islamic society. This we know, for those of us who studied the history of totalitarianism, that is how every totalitarian model works, through exclusion and inclusion that is absolute, and with no exit option.
But some people would say that your criticism is very hateful as well. Why do you need to be so critical against Islam?
Again, like I said, I've been inspired, also not just through reading books, but also through empirical life that I can see, that to attain life, freedom, and loving relationships between human beings, between neighbors, and founding groups based on freedom, free membership, that religions, and today Islam, has to be scrutinized, criticized, and believers in Islam must be confronted with the logic of their faith. And the logic of their faith is one that leads to boundaries between people and therefore to hatred. Criticism of a religion is not hateful. It's very useful. And in Islam, it's very urgent and very necessary.